12th of November 1996, 03:55 p.m. the city of Shymkent in Kazakhstan. A chartered aircraft of Kazakhstan Airlines, 9Y 1907 Ilyushin 76, took off from the same city, flying towards New Delhi. On board were several small traders from neighboring Kyrgyzstan. They were going to India to buy wool so that they could bring it back and sell it in Central Asian markets. Around the same time, in Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport, a Saudi Airlines flight SV-763, the Boeing 747, was getting ready to take off. There were 312 passengers on the flight, of whom 231 were Indians. Major of them were blue-collar workers, construction workers, or domestic workers. On their way to Saudi Arabia to hunt for work within the span of next few minutes, let's see how these two blinking dots on the radar keep getting closer and closer to each other, and then merged into one. The Saudi Airlines flight took off from the Delhi airport. That evening, air traffic controller VK Duda was on duty. He was communicating with both Saudi and Kazakhstan planes and was guiding them. He was the one who gave clearance to the Saudi airplane to take off from the Delhi airport. A few minutes later, the pilots of the Saudi plane reported to him that the plane had reached the altitude of 10,000 ft. They request clearance to climb up to 14,000 ft. On duty, ATC Duda grants permission. On the other hand, the Kazakh airplane wants to land. Duda tells the Kazakh airplane to remain at the height of 15,000 ft or above, and not to descend any further, as the Saudi airplane was flying at 14,000 ft. On the screen of ATC VK Duda, the planes are seen as blinking dots. Within the span of next few minutes, he sees how these two blinking dots on the radar kept getting closer and closer to each other, and then merged into one, and then disappear. This was the point when Mr. Duda realized that something terrible had happened. Being an ATC is a stressful job, but it used to be even more stressful back then. And it wasn't that the ATCs weren't trained, they were very educated and extensively trained. On the ill-fated evening of 12th of November, what were the mistakes? And who made them? Mistakes that led to this deadly disaster. Two planes crashed into one another. To understand the story to its depths and about why and how it happened and how it impacted the aviation sector in India, we first need to have some basic knowledge. There are multiple corridors in the airports for the incoming airplanes and the departing airplanes, so that accident shouldn't take place. Apart from this, the height at which the airplanes fly is called the flight level. According to the International Civil Aviation Organization's standards, ICAO, the flight level between two planes should be vertically at least 1,000 away from another. Apart from this, there needs to be a 14-kilometer radius for safety. These are the basic rules of aviation. You guys shall ask a question: who ensures that all airplanes follow the rules at all times? This is ensured by the air traffic controllers, the ATCs. The ATCs monitor the flying airplanes from the ground, their position, speed, and their altitude, height. It is very important to keep a check on these. Air traffic controllers can see it on their screens as blinking dots. The airplanes look like blinking dots on the radar. So the next question is, how do the ATCs get this information? The details of every single plane, they get this information from the radar. Radar is a device that uses radio waves to detect objects that are at a distance from it. Radar can detect airplanes, spacecraft, but the radar used to detect airplanes can be classified into two basic parts: primary radars and secondary radars. Primary radar is a system for which antennas have been placed at strategic locations all over the world. Those antennas emit radio waves, and when the radio waves return after being reflected by the airplanes, they calculate the distance of the plane based on the time taken by the radio wave. Primary radars can tell you the horizontal distance of an airplane, but they can't tell you the altitude of the airplane. In such cases, secondary radars are used to calculate the vertical distance. This is a bit of complex technology. A device called a transponder is placed on top of an airplane, and the radio wave signals from the antennas are caught by the transponder and responds with its own signal. With this, it provides more accurate information. The technology of the secondary radar is quite new. During 1996, when the incident took place, the secondary radar wasn't used back then. The ATCs relied only on the data from the primary radar, and to find out the exact altitude, the ATCs constantly communicated with the pilots, and the pilots would inform them about the altitudes. And then, the ATC would dot down the height and speed parameters they would use it to manually calculate and chart the flight path. There is a popular theory regarding accidents, which you might be familiar with. The Swiss cheese model. As most of you know, Swiss cheese has many holes in it. If you stack the cheese slices on top of each other, the holes don't exactly match with each other. You can't look across the multiple slices because the possibility that all the holes would align is very negligible. The accidents that take place aren't because of a singular reason. Rather, multiple reasons align to the peak coincidence. Even if one of the mistakes didn't happen, this disaster might have been prevented. A series of small mistakes added up to this disaster. At first, the Indian officials thought the Saudi airplane hadn't followed the instructions properly, that even though they were instructed to stay at 14,000 FT, the plane might have gone up to 15,000 FT and crashed with the Kazakh airplane. But when the black boxes of the planes were found, the flight data recorder revealed the exact recording of the conversations between the pilots, and they found that the Saudi airplane was at 14,000 FT, and the crash between the two airplanes was at 14,000 FT. It meant that the Kazakh airplane had descended from 15,000 FT to 14,000 FT. Why? VK Duta, the air traffic controller, had told the pilots of the Kazakh airplane to not descend below 15,000 feet. The audio recording from the black box showed that the pilots in the Kazakh airplane weren't even listening properly to what the ATC was saying. They were complaining to each other about the traffic in Delhi. And there was another problem in the Kazakh plane, that there was a language barrier between ATC and the pilots, which was translated to the pilots by a radio operator on the plane, who was translating the messages from the ATC from English to Russian so that the pilots could understand. The report of the accident concluded that the instruction from the ATC was subjected to an error of understanding. The ATC told them to maintain the flight level at a certain altitude, but they misunderstood it. Or they thought that the instruction was for some other flight. They misunderstood the instruction and descended, leading to the death of all 289 passengers and 23 crew members of the Saudi airplane, and 27 passengers and 10 crew members of Kazakh airplane. Total fatality of 349. Timothy J. Place, a United States Air Force pilot who was flying to New Delhi at the time of the disaster, was the only eyewitness to the disaster. And this is termed as an unerasable mark on the Indian aviation history, and thankfully, till now, such a mishap hasn't occurred in India again. After this, airplanes haven't collided mid-air. The reasons? First, there are now separated air corridors for the incoming and departing planes. Second, the installation of secondary radar. Third, the government made it mandatory for every flying aircraft to be installed with the TCAS, Traffic Collision Avoidance System, TCAS. And fortunately, till now, there has been no other mid-air collision. This is the basic reason. Now that you've heard the compelling tale of the Charkhi Dadri mid-air collision, it's time to take action. If you found this story gripping and thought-provoking, don't just stand by. Hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more riveting content from the world of aviation. Together, let's spread awareness, honor the memory of the victims, and work towards a safer future in the skies. Your support makes a difference. Let's fly higher, together.